All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bill Erickson. I'm the agriculture agent for Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Monmouth County. And tonight, I'm happy to share with you our second program in our Season of New Beginnings series. This is an interdepartmental program series with collaboration amongst 4-H, the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, the Rutgers Master Gardeners of Monmouth County, and the Family and Community Health Sciences departments. So each week, each Wednesday, April 7th, 14th, and 21st from 7 to 8 p.m., we have a great program for you. And tonight, we have 5 speakers who are going to share with us. First, we have Ready, Set, Sow with Master Gardener Jane Zisk, and she's going to talk about seeding your spring garden. And then we have Sensational Spring Greens with Rachel Tansey, who will inform us about the health attributes and culinary delights of using these spring greens. We have the do's and don'ts of spring lawn care with Diane Larson. Then Where the Land Meets the Sea, we'll hear from our Marine Extension Agent, Dr. Doug Zemeckis. And finally, we will hear from our IPM associate, Steve Retke, talking about landscape curiosities. So lots of good reasons to get outside, get active in your yard, and many healthy things that we can do in Monmouth County this spring. So before we get started, just some webinar logistics. This session is being recorded. Everyone is on mute and your videos are not being shared, but the program is being recorded. And if you have any questions, please post them into our chat box, or if you're having technical issues, and we'll be able to answer them for you. As the presenters are going along, if you have a question that comes up, go ahead and enter it into the chat, and then they can respond to you at the conclusion of their presentation. So you don't have to wait till the end to enter any questions into the chat box, and we will take care of that for you. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jane to share her presentation and to join us. Get things started. Hi, Jane.
Hi, thank you so much. Let me share my screen. And we will get ready, set, and sow. So if you don't already have a garden set up, you need to get one ready, and you should locate it where there's sufficient sun, water, and good soil for your plants, because sun, water, and soil is what every plant needs. Most vegetables need 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. That's considered full sun, particularly your fruiting veggies like your tomatoes and peppers, etc. Your root vegetables and some herbs can take 6 hours. And your leaf vegetables, your lettuce and spinach and kale, can handle 4. Now that's only leaf lettuce, not head lettuce. So you want to put your garden somewhere where you get plenty of sun. You also want to make sure you have the right amount of water. And for this, you want to think like Goldilocks. You don't want too little, you don't want too much, you want just right. So if your garden is in a spot where you're not close to a spigot, to hook up a hose, you might need to lug a watering can around or something like that. If you have an automatic sprinkler system, you want to be careful that you don't put the garden too close to that, because you don't want to water your plants from above. That encourages fungus and mold. You don't want to do that. And if you have clay soil and you know that rain puddles, don't put your garden there because you will drown your plants. So the ideal amount of water is 1 inch per week for a vegetable garden, and you can provide that either by watering by hand with a hose or with a watering can, or putting down a soaker hose, particularly on a timer. That's helpful. And for soil, vegetables prefer a pH in the range of 6 to 7. And remember, pH is the measure of acidity in the soil. And the best way to find out how good your soil is and if it's all ready for planting is to get a soil test. And if you go to this website, this Rutgers website, How To, it'll tell you how to collect your soil sample and where to mail it in. It costs about $20, but it's well worth it. You get a really detailed report which tells you what you might need to add to the soil to make it better. But one of the most important things with the soil in your vegetable garden is good drainage. If you have clay soil that's too hard and compact, or sandy soil that's too loose and allows water to run right through, either one, make sure you till in compost. Or if you have raised beds, you can purchase good quality topsoil from a reputable nursery. Now let's get set. What do we want to plant? And what can we plant now? So it's April, it's early spring still, and it gets a little chilly at night. So you want to plant your cold crops. You want to plant your snap peas and snow peas, your leaf lettuces, not your head, leaf, other leafy vegetables, arugula, spinach, and Swiss chard, some of your root vegetables like radishes, carrots, and beets, and broccoli, cabbage, and your cooler weather herbs, parsley and cilantro and chives. Now, one thing I like to do in my garden is try one new thing every year, just to play around and experiment. But the best things to plant are the things that you will eat. And in fact, most of these you can plant in March, around St. Patrick's Day, middle of March. Now, also to get set and to understand more about how to plant your vegetables and where and when, it's important to read the back of the seed packet. It has a lot of information. Now, the seed packet on the left here is for lettuce. This is a head lettuce, igloo. It'll show you the depth to plant the seeds, in this case, only 1/4 inch down. It'll show you how far away to plant the seeds from each other. And in this case, it says thin to 8 inches, because remember, a head lettuce is pretty big, so you want plenty of space for them to grow. It'll also show you some kind of map of the United States like this, color-coded. And if we look and find New Jersey up here, we'll see it's green. So we look at the green key down here, and it shows us that we can plant this particular seed anytime between April and June. Skip July, it's too hot. And then again in August or September for a fall harvest. And on the very bottom, you'll see dates. It's these seeds, were packed for 2019. And the last sell date is in November. Now, does that mean it's 2021 and these seeds are no good anymore? No, not really. It just means that they're not guaranteed to all germinate, so you can still plant them. Now let's look at the seed packet on the right. This is for an all lettuce blend. This is leaf lettuce. It has all the same information, but just in a different format. The date is up top. These were for 2020. You see, I keep my seeds. And here is our map of the US. Now the colors are a little different, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you find New Jersey on this map here, and it's yellow in this map. And we look at the key here, and it says these seeds should be planted anytime from March through September. So you can plant them right through the summertime. The spacing and the planting depth are shown with little pictures as well as words. So these seeds only get planted 1/8 of an inch deep. That's really, really shallow. But you can space them 1 inch apart because leaf lettuce stands up straight, so you can have them a lot closer than a head lettuce. So for any seed you're considering planting, check the back of the seed packet and it'll tell you everything you need to know. Now let's sow. The first thing you want to do when you go out into your garden is remove all the weeds where you want to plant, because those weeds will compete for water and nutrients with your vegetables. So get them on out of there, root and all. Then you're going to put your seeds in the ground, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But you're going to mind the depth, how deeply you plant, and you're going to mind how close together you put your seeds. Then you're going to cover it up, and you're going to pat the soil and firm it so that you're sure you have good contact between the seeds and the soil. And then you're going to mark where you planted it, because if you're like me and you have a large garden, you're going to forget which little corner you put your radishes in. So here's my picture up on the right of my little plastic spoon. And my husband always teases me every year, ooh, we're getting a bumper crop of spoons this year. But that's just what I happen to have in my back pocket when I went in the garden one year, and that's just what I use. So I put it in the corners, and I know that that's where I should water, because that's where I planted something. And that way I don't have to waste water in the whole garden. I just water where I have my seeds. And it's important to water them gently so that you don't wash your seeds away. You can use a hose with a nozzle and either set it on shower, or it might say garden, or it might say gentle spray. But turn it around, turn the nozzle and find a nice gentle spray. Or if you use a watering can like this, make sure you have this thing on the end that can come off. Is called a rose or a rosette. Make sure you have one that has a nice, gentle watering pattern. And then that's it, your seeds are planted. But what you need to do then is every day go out and check the soil, make sure that it's moist, because dry seeds won't germinate. And the tender roots that come out, the first little roots that come out, they dry out very quickly. So you want to make sure you have your plants healthy, happy, and with plenty of water to drink, but don't drown them. Now let's look at seeds more carefully. The sizes vary greatly, as you can see in this picture. Snap peas and snow peas are about 1/4 inch big. So they're kind of good. You can handle them one at a time, and that's pretty easy. And the rule of thumb is that seeds get planted 2 to 3 times as deep as the seed is large. So snap peas, if you don't look at the back of your seed packet, you can estimate they should go about 3/4 to an inch deep. Now you'll see radishes are much smaller. These middle seeds are radish seeds. They're only about 1/8 of an inch long. And these are the leaf lettuce seeds. They are so tiny. Many of them are even smaller than the poppy seeds you get on your bagels. So those go very, very, very shallow. So I'm guessing you're asking, do you have any tips on planting these? And I'm so glad you asked, because I do. For snap and snow peas, what I do is I pre-germinate them, because they tend to be very, very dry and shriveled. And if you put them directly in the ground, it'll take a while for them to germinate, because it'll take a while for them to soak up enough water to plump up to actually germinate. So I take a plate you see here on the left, and I put a paper towel down. I wet the paper towel. I set the seeds on that one, and I cover it with another paper towel, and I keep them damp. They don't have to be soaking wet, but damp. And since the plate is round and the paper towel is square, I crimp up like a pie the edges so that I don't get water all over the counter. And in a day or two, well, pretty much 2 days, you'll see these cute little white things come out, and those are the first little tender roots. So now we're ready to go outside and plant. So we take our plate outside over to the right, and if we're going to plant it in a row, you can just mark a little row with your finger. And make sure it's about 1 inch deep. And if you happen to go too deep or too shallow, you can always fix it. Then one by one, very carefully, you pick up your pre-germinated seed and place them about an inch or two apart in the soil. Now be very, very careful with that little tender root so you don't snap it off. And then what I do is I just push the soil in from both sides and pat it down and water it. Another way that I happen to plant snap and snow peas is on this trellis here. This was actually a tomato cage that doesn't work very well for me, but I found it works really well for snow and snap peas. And over the years, with some experimentation, I found that if I put in 3 seeds, as you see here, they climb up and have plenty of space. So for this, I just poke a little hole about 3/4 of an inch, an inch deep, put 1 seed in each, cover it up, pat it down, and water it. And there you go. In about a week, you'll have little seedlings coming up. Now, for radishes, remember they're a little smaller, so they don't go as deep into the soil, but radishes are a root and they get a little big. So you don't want to put them too close together, because if you have your seeds too close together, they're too squished and the radishes can't grow. So I use kind of a modified square foot gardening technique. You see, I put in my plastic spoon for my marker, and I can have 16 radishes in 1 square foot. So I have 4 rows of 4, and you'll see I very carefully put 1 seed in each hole. It's a little tedious, but I like that better than planting them too close together, because I really hate pulling out plants. I just feel terrible. So I'd rather take the time to put 1 seed in each hole. And for this, I just poke my finger in and make a little hole, and there's the seed. Cover it up, water it, and in about a week or 2, you'll have happy little radish seedlings. Now for lettuce, because remember the leaf lettuce seeds, remember they were so tiny, some smaller than a poppy seed. What I do is I'll pour the seed, some seed into my hand, and with the other hand, I take a pinch, much like you take a pinch of salt to add when you're cooking, and I just sprinkle it around. And I do that because it doesn't really matter how close those seeds are. And you can see the arrows are showing you where some of the seeds fell on the ground in between my plastic spoon markers. And because these need to be very shallow, remember this was the 1/8 inch, rather than covering over them, I reach over and I grab some loose soil and I sprinkle the soil on top of the seeds. So you just barely cover them, almost don't see them. If there's one or two that are still there, I'll just kind of rub my hands over and pat it. I pat it a little bit. And this middle picture shows you my watering can with a nice little gentle spray. And then the picture on the right shows you the lettuce growing. This is last year. Now you see, there are very few plastic spoons in this picture because I used the trellises as my markers. Since I knew I had snap peas here and here, I just spread my lettuce seed out in between, so I knew where to water. All the garden spot here in the back that didn't have any seeds, I didn't have to water. I didn't have to worry about. I just water where the seeds are. And so with that, I say thank you for your attention. I don't know if there were any questions.
Thank you, Jane. That was great.
Let me
Does
stop
anybody have
sharing.
any questions for Jane? You can go ahead and write them in the chat box.
Oh, I can see the chat now.
Yep, and
Okay.
she'll be here to answer them. Thank you very much, Jane. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
you're very welcome.
All right. Next up, we have Rachel Tansey, who is going to talk to us about what you can do with some of these spring greens in your garden. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to start a little bit and talk to you about these spring greens and discuss just really how great they are for you. So just a quick overview, a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you'll get in green leafy vegetables, even your cruciferous vegetables, pretty much anything in green in color will give you a multitude of vitamins and minerals, which help keep our bodies healthy and strong. A lot of vitamin C to help our immune system stay strong and fight infections, help protect our bodies against different illnesses and whatnot. At this point, we're all looking for a little healthier immune system. Full of antioxidants and phytochemicals. These help us protect against certain cancers and possibly decrease the risk of certain ones. Fiber, very important. Eating our greens will actually help slow our digestion and help us stay full longer. And then many of them are full of water as well, and these help our bodies stay hydrated to some respect. So as I said, the vitamin C is very important for our immune systems. Vitamin K is really good for our blood and blood clotting, helping us heal when it comes to cuts and scrapes. There's actually iron in a lot of our dark green leafy vegetables. This helps our body and our lungs with the oxygen moving throughout our body, needed for overall health and energy levels as well. If you have a decreased iron, you often feel fatigued. And then calcium also. And calcium is really important because in order for our body to absorb the calcium, we need two other things. One of which is vitamin D, which hopefully we're getting from the sun. And then the other one is vitamin C. So if you're eating maybe a handful of spinach, you're going to get vitamin C and you're going to get your vitamin D from the sun, and then you'll have your calcium. So it will be readily absorbed into the body. Just some fun ways to get your greens into your diet. One of the things we like to do once we start our garden is get those zucchini and get them where they're not too big. You don't really want them to have a lot of seeds in them. And we have a spiralizer and we make zoodles. So you can, if you're new to that, you can mix them half and half with maybe some regular pasta, or you can just go straight with them. And we like to eat them just kind of warmed, not really cooking them. We just kind of put them in a little skillet. We sprinkle some lemon juice on them, maybe a little olive oil and some other seasoning. And that's sort of our side dish with, whatever you might put in it. You see in the picture there's tomatoes, but we'll even do it sometimes with lots of other garden herbs and vegetables as well, and make a whole vegetarian type dish. green smoothies are all the rage these days. So really, I mean, honestly, you can make a smoothie out of anything, and essentially you can add pretty much whatever you want but by adding that handful of spinach or kale, you're upping the nutritional value of that smoothie, and maybe throwing in some of your herbs, trying to use all those garden herbs any which way. Last year it got to be kind of end of season, and it's not a typical pesto, but I kind of took every herb in the garden and just cut them down to where they were still viable, because it was, like I said, the end of the season, and made pesto and froze it over the winter and was able to use it. I had a couple jars full, so that was great too. Just a few other recipes I wanted to kind of make mention of. Kale chips, very popular right now, super easy to make. You just kind of take your kale, rinse it, lay it flat, sprinkle it with olive oil. I actually even use the spray olive oil, so that way you're not overdoing it with that oil. Sprinkle of salt, put it in the oven, let them bake for a bit. It's a great healthy snack, gives you that crunch, that little saltiness. Instead of, a potato chip, go for a kale chip, and then you're getting extra nutrients. Also a garlic scape pesto, same kind of idea as what I mentioned earlier. This one calls for pistachios. When I made my pesto, I was using walnuts just to add some omega-3s into the recipe, but you can really use any nut to give it that little consistency. And you can throw in a little bit of Parmesan cheese, olive oil, blend it all together. You get a great pesto over your pasta, maybe put it over your zucchini noodles. That way you're getting extra nutrition there as well. The sugar snap peas Jane was mentioning, we love those here. So, one of the recipes we sort of came up with was just grilling them. We typically eat them raw, so they don't really make it too often to the grill. But when you get an abundance, it's a great new way to get that nutrient and the sugar snap peas into your diet if you're tired of eating them raw. It just gives you as a nice little side dish. And if you go right here to this website over here on the right, there's plenty of other recipes. And if you notice, there'll be videos here as well, that you'd be able to view it also. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Thank you so much. And that's it.
Thanks, Rachel. That's great. I love kale chips. It's one of my favorite easy things to make, but I've not tried the zoodles before. I'm going to have to try to make that. Those look really good. All right. Next up, we have Diane Larson, who is going to talk to us about spring lawn care. So our gardens and our lawns, we want them all to be as healthy as possible. And Diane has some do's and don'ts of what we should be doing in our spring lawn. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. So it's spring and everybody wants to take care of their lawn. So tonight I'm going to talk about what you should be doing and a lot about what you shouldn't be doing in the spring for your lawn. I just want you to take note of the highlighted part right there. That's the Rutgers publication website. I will be referring to some fact sheets on my talk, so you can download them at this site. So if you want to take note of that, that would be great. Also, there's my contact information, my emails. You're welcome to email me with questions anytime. So Forsythia, the harbor of spring, right? First sign of spring. Everybody's so happy to see it. Now it's in full bloom, and now's a great time to apply your crabgrass pre-emergent. So do that when the Forsythia are in full bloom. Crabgrass are annual weeds, and you'll see the picture on the right. It's a grassy type of weed. So an annual weed starts to germinate, it grows, it goes to seed, and it dies in 1 year. So now they are germinating, typically when the ground is about 50 degrees, about an inch below the soil. That's the temperature that crabgrass seeds need to germinate. And 9 years out of 10, it coincides with the peak bloom of the Forsythia. So that's why it's a good way to know when to do that. If you wait, the crabgrass will be germinated, and if you put that pre-emergent down, it's going to do nothing. So the crabgrass pre-emergent prevents the seed from germinating. So go ahead and do that now. Don't wait too much longer, but now's a great time to do that. Do mow high and let it fly. So we've all been this guy mowing his lawn, right? We go away for a week or more and we come back, or it's raining and for a bunch of days, you can't get out there and mow your lawn, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go and cut it down so I don't have to deal with it again. And it's a lot of work. He looks like he's struggling there, but it's really not the thing to do. You don't want to cut more than a third of the leaf blade off at once. It's just not good for the lawn. And you'll see, look at all the clumps of grass around there. You're going to have to blow that off or rake that all up, because if you don't, it's just going to smother the lawn. Also, you want to mow at a 3 to 3.5 inch height. The higher the leaf blade, the taller the leaf blade is, that's going to shade the roots and keep them nice and moist. It's going to shade out weed seeds from germinating. So it's really helpful. And the longer the leaf blade is, the deeper the roots. So if you want to keep your lawn at a low height, 2 inches, those roots just aren't going to grow deep, and your lawn is going to be stressed. So you want to mow high, and you want to let the clippings fly. By not collecting the clippings and letting them fly, you're actually adding about a pound of nitrogen a year to your lawn. So that's one whole less fertilizer application you're going to have to make. So that's why it's a great idea to do. You don't want these grass clippings in the dump. You don't want them in the garbage. They do a great job right there. And contrary to what a lot of people think, grass clippings on the lawn does not cause thatch buildup. Thatch buildup is there because of too many fertilizers or chemicals, but these clippings, they're really mostly water and nitrogen. So leave them, let the clippings fly. And you want to sharpen your mower blades. So besides not looking good to have shredded blades in your lawn, it really helps to control disease. So disease is mostly caused by fungus, and the spores of fungus land on the leaf blade. If you have a nice cleanly cut leaf blade, there's not much surface area for the fungal spores to enter the leaf blade. But look at the example on the left. That's a shredded blade of grass because of a mower blade that was not sharp. And that's a lot of surface area. The fungal spores can get into there and really give you a disease on your lawn, and you don't want that. So get those mower blades sharpened before you start mowing your lawn. Don't thatch your lawn now. Wait until September. I see people out there dethatching their lawns now, and it's really not a good idea. If you think about it, the soil is cold, and the lawn just isn't going to recover enough. In September, the soil is warm, the air is warm, and you could dethatch then, and the lawn is going to recover beautifully. You're going to want to dethatch when your thatch layer is about 1 inch, and by doing that, it's going to allow more nutrients to get down into the soil. It's going to prevent insects, because a lot of insects live in that thatch layer, like chinch bugs and sod webworms, and you don't want them there. So just hold off. If you have a good thatch layer, it's really much better to wait until September to dethatch. Get your soil tested. Thank you, Jane. You did a great job of explaining the soil test. And here's the link for the Rutgers soil testing lab again. So you're going to send your soil in, and you're going to get a report. And there's a sample on the right here of the report that you're going to get. They're going to tell you what your pH is and what your macronutrients are. And then the next page that's not shown here is going to tell you what you need to lime and fertilize with and how much. So be sure to get that before you fertilize. And don't fertilize before March 1st. So I know we're a little late to be talking about this, but keep it in mind. And the reason for this is there's actually a New Jersey fertilizer law that started in 2011. And that gives blackout dates to fertilizer. So a homeowner cannot fertilize their lawn between November 15th and March 1st. And the reason for that is to keep nitrogen and phosphorus specifically out of our water systems. When the ground is frozen or the ground is just too cold to take up those fertilizers, they're going to run off and get into the water. So you really, you can't fertilize before March 1st. And you don't really need to anyway. Don't fertilize more than once in the spring. Your lawn needs about 3 pounds, 2 to 3 pounds of nitrogen a year. And again, a pound less if you're not collecting your clippings. Once in the spring and once to twice in the fall. That's the ideal time to fertilize with. And you want to go for a low maintenance lawn. So the clippings are not removed. And here's the time frame for that: once in April and then again in September. If you need a little bit more maintenance to it, you could do it again in October, late October. But you don't need to fertilize more than once in the spring. And usually those fertilizers are mixed with the crabgrass preemergent that we talked about, so it actually works out fine. And you don't want to apply fertilizers with phosphorus. According to that New Jersey fertilizer law, you cannot apply phosphorus to your lawn unless you have a soil test showing that your lawn actually needs phosphorus. And again, this is really going to help keep our waters clean and keep the runoff to a minimum. So on this lawn fertilizer bag, you're going to see 1005. The first number is nitrogen, the middle is phosphorus, that 5 is potassium. So you see you want a 0 middle number, and that means there's no phosphorus in there. Don't fall into step. So what I mean by that, we've all heard of these step programs that you kind of feel pressured that you have to keep up with to get your lawn looking great. But really you don't need them. But usually the first step is crabgrass and fertilizer. So we talked about that. If you have a crabgrass problem in the past, it's a good idea to use the crabgrass preventer plus fertilizer. If you've never had a crabgrass problem, you don't need to put that down. Put down the fertilizer. I've also seen some of these step ones to include a broadleaf weed killer. If you have broadleaf weeds, you could use that. But if you don't need to use that. You don't want to put any extra on your lawn that you don't need to. Step number 2, I have seen is a fertilizer plus a broadleaf weed killer, like a weed and feed kind of application. I've also seen them include insect control for chinch bugs and sodworms. Again, if you don't have weeds and if you don't have insects, you don't need that. Step 3 is a summer fertilization plus iron. Well, do you need iron? I don't know. Let's look at your soil test. Most of the time, your soil does not need iron, so you don't need this. And I've also seen them include a broadleaf weed killer and grub control. So if you don't have grubs, you don't need to apply this. And then step 4 is a fall fertilizer, also a winterizer, which is usually recommended. So don't feel like you have to go on a schedule. You don't need most of these things. And if you have a problem, come and call us, talk to us, and we'll tell you what to do about that when it comes up. But most of these things, it's not worth it to treat ahead of time. But you do want to treat broadleaf weeds. Now, all these weeds on this page are called winter annuals. So they actually, the seed has germinated last fall through the winter. And they've been growing, and now with the spring, the warm weather, they're starting to flower, and then they're going to die because they're all annuals. So on the left, we see henbit, very pretty. The bottom left, corn speedwell, purple dead nettle, common chickweed, and then hairy bittercress on the right. That's like the poster child for winter annual weeds. I've been getting so many calls and emails about this. So it's been green, since the fall, but it's just starting to flower now. So everybody sees it and it's just all over the place. On the hand, you could see the flowers, and then behind that is the seed pod. So each one of those little pods has hundreds of seeds in it, and they're going to start to pop open. They actually explode. You could hear them when they dry. So the key with this is to control these before they get to this point where the seeds are being dispersed. You could pull them by hand, or you could spot treat them with a broadleaf herbicide. I like a spot treat better with a liquid, squirt bottle, because you don't need this all over your lawn. You just need to spray where the weeds are. I was going to say something else about, oh, bitter cress. I was going to say something else about that, but I forget. All right. Well, oh, I know what it was. I talked about not collecting your clippings, right? But I think in the case of these winter annual weeds, especially bittercress and chickweed, if they're going to seed like this, if they're in flower, this is the one time I would say, go ahead and mow your lawn and collect the clippings, because you're going to be collecting all the seed off of them, and that you're not going to be returning that seed to the soil. So that's the only time I would say it's okay to collect your clippings, just that once, to knock off all those seeds from the weeds. And don't renovate your lawn or start a new one from seed this now. I talked about dethatching in the fall. You want to dethatch in September and overseed then if you want to start a new lawn. Once you pull all those weeds out, once you kill all those weeds, you may have some bare spots. So that's okay. Just rake the soil. You could sprinkle some seed on there in the bare spots. But to do a total renovation, again, the soil is too cool, and your weed pressure, the seed pressure is way too high, and it's going to be really hard to establish. Plus, a lawn takes 9 to 10 months to completely establish where the roots are nice and deep, so it could really hold up to the heat pressure of the summer. So that's why that September timeframe is perfect. You start it in September, and by the time the heat comes of the summer of the following year, they could withstand it. If you start a new lawn now, yeah, the seeds are going to germinate. It's going to look okay, but those roots are just not down deep enough, and it's going to be so stressed when we get to a real hot part of the summer. It's probably not going to make it. So just hang tight till September and renovate your lawn then. Water your lawn. We've had so much rain. There's no need to water your lawn until the summer when we have drought conditions. And to tell if your lawn is getting a little too dry, you step on it, and the picture on the right, if your footprint stays in the lawn, then you know it needs a watering. The lawn needs about 1 inch to 1 3/4 inch of water a week. That includes rain and your irrigation system. So the only way to provide that is to keep an eye on the weather, keep an eye on how much rain you have. A rain gauge is an excellent tool for the garden. And then just go and hit your timer and water when you need it. Don't water every day for 15 minutes each zone. That's way too shallow. The key is to water deeply and infrequently. So when you water, you want that water to get down to a depth of 6 inches. It's going to do no good if that water just stays on the top inch of soil, because you're going to be encouraging the roots to stay at the top of the soil. You want those roots to grow down deep, and they're going to follow that water right down. So don't water. And when you do water, just kind of be in tune of what's going on, and then water when you need it. So my whole talk, the do's equaled 6 and the don'ts equaled 8. So the don'ts win. Just wait until the fall. That's when you're going to put your energy into your lawn. Right now, okay, take care of a couple weeds, give a little fertilizer, get out there and enjoy it. That's what the spring is about. And do have a happy spring. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Diane. We've got a couple of questions as well.
Okay.
One was about whether you can use corn gluten meal as a crabgrass preventative.
You can. It's not as effective as the chemical pre-emergence, and corn gluten meal is a lot of nitrogen. So what tends to happen is you're actually fertilizing the weeds, we have seen that the crabgrass really likes it. So it's not as effective.
And one more question, how about using vinegar to spot treat weeds as a natural herbicide?
Okay, vinegar is not a selective herbicide. So anything you spray it on, it's going to kill. So whereas the broadleaf weed killer in a spray bottle, that's not going to kill your grass. That's just going to kill that weed. Vinegar is going to kill your grass all around that weed. So I think the USDA did approve vinegar as a natural herbicide. So it's legal to use, but be very careful because it's going to kill any plants or any lawn around that weed.
Great. Thank you, Diane.
Okay,
If there's any other
thank you.
questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box. You can always call or email our office to get in touch with Diane as well. And next up, I want to welcome Dr. Doug Zemeckis, who's our Marine Extension Agent, and he's going to share with us some of the spring fisheries in Monmouth County. Welcome, Doug. You are on mute.
Cool. Good evening. You got my slides though, Bill? Thumbs up.
Looks good.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for organizing the great program, Bill and team. It's a pleasure to be here virtually with everybody this evening. As Bill just noted, I'm going to talk about some spring fisheries in Monmouth County for the second part of my 10-minute talk here, but also I want to build on and segue from what we just heard from Diane in terms of spring lawn care. She had a lot of recommendations for best practices and also some regulations on reducing fertilizer use. And she noted how it can impact our waterways. So first part of my talk tonight, I also want to touch on what could happen to our local marine watersheds when excess nutrients make their way into our coastal ecosystems. So folks, we're hearing a lot of the terrestrial here today, but I'm going to be as my title indicated, talking about where the land meets the sea. So we are the Great Garden State, but we also have over 140 miles of coastline in our marine ecosystems from Middlesex, Monmouth County, all the way down the Atlantic coast into the Delaware Bay. So we have many rich, productive marine ecosystems that support our commercial and recreational marine fisheries, as well as our shellfish aquaculture that's in New Jersey, and all the great recreation and tourism benefits provided by these marine ecosystems. And in order to maintain their health and productivity, we also not only need to be responsible stewards out on the water, but also on land, given that what we do on land in our personal and or professional lives also impacts our marine ecosystems. So over on the right is a map of New Jersey. These are the different watershed management areas. Number 12 is the Monmouth Watershed Management Area. It essentially overlaps quite well with the outline of Monmouth County. But an individual watershed, for those, a textbook definition here, is a land area that channels rainfall or snow melt. So here's a depiction into creeks, streams, and rivers that eventually outflow to points such as reservoirs, bays, or the ocean here along the coast. So the rainwater, watering on our property to maintain your garden, as we heard from Diane and others this evening, that water eventually gets into the groundwater, makes its way into a creek, stream, and or river, and gets out into our marine ecosystems. You know, up in Monmouth County, you have the Shrewsbury River as an example, Shark River. So what is done on the land also therefore starts to interact with the marine ecosystems. One major interaction, typically negative, that is a stressor on many of our coastal marine ecosystems in New Jersey and throughout much of the United States, is what happens when that excess nutrient gets into our local marine waterways. This is referred to as eutrophication. This schematic here from a group called Project Eutrophication. So eutrophication is when there's excessive plant and algae growth. So you could have too much of a good thing when one of the limiting factors in photosynthesis, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and nutrients, when you get an excess of nutrients, more than the typical amounts, you can get a bloom of the algae or the phytoplankton. So here's a schematic. It actually is kind of similar to, in some ways, here's Raritan Bay. If you think of urban runoff, agricultural and livestock runoff from fertilizers perhaps on agricultural farmland, residential runoff, talking here tonight of home gardening, septic tanks, leaching are an issue particularly out on Long Island, the runoff eventually, that excess nitrogen and phosphorus, matched with the right conditions of sunlight and carbon dioxide, you can get an algae bloom. And you might say, Doug, aren't algae great? They're food, they're low trophic level, they're food for zooplankton, fishes, and shellfish, which is true. But when you get too much algae, the algae bloom in a short amount of time, not necessarily maybe too much that could be eaten by the higher trophic level animals, or perhaps poor timing. But then they are taken up and decomposed by bacteria, which use up a lot of the oxygen in the water. So you can actually get a reduction in the amount of oxygen. It can also, through the blooms, this is a shot from Barnegat Bay, you can get a reduced clarity of the water, which can also cloud out the seagrasses and seaweeds that are growing in our marine systems, which provide important habitat as well for our, particularly for the early life stages of a lot of the marine fishes that inhabit our coastal marine ecosystems. So heard a lot just there from Diane of a lot of great practices and regulations governing on residential properties of fertilization as fertilizers, and great tips to follow, not only for managing your home property, but also from being a responsible steward, given that your practices are also impacting our marine waterways. So definitely defer to the experts. I just had this slide in here. If those have been involved in other programs here in Extension, or another source to hear about responsible stewardship, Jersey Friendly Yards. They have some guides about how fertilizers and practices on your home properties impact our marine waterways. So just wanted to include a slide there as another reference, jerseyyards.org. And segueing over to the fisheries, as I noted, a lot of our finfish and shellfish, either for their full life cycle, various points in their adult life, or particularly the juvenile larval fish when they're young, they have residence within our rivers, bays, and estuaries. And we have very valuable commercial and recreational marine fisheries in Monmouth County and throughout New Jersey. And the health and productivity of these resources is also contingent upon healthy water quality and marine ecosystems. And just some data here, our marine fisheries are worth over $2 billion annually to the state of New Jersey, as well as our recreational fisheries, an additional $1.2 billion, accounting for over 50,000 jobs. So our fisheries are key components of our social and cultural fabric of New Jersey along the Jersey Shore. And they also provide high quality, fresh seafood for both locally and even seafood markets around the world. And these species at the bottom, some are flounder, black sea bass, bluefish, striped bass, tautog. These are all species that are migrating into our nearshore waters. Here in April, May, June are some of the best times to catch all of these species, and during the adult phases, but also the young of the year larval fishes of these species. They also have some degree of estuarine dependency, or they like to live in our rivers and estuaries. So they're impacted not only near and afar by fishing offshore, but also fishing inshore, as well as the contingent, their prosperity on the quality of the habitat, including the waters in our coastal estuaries. So just here in the brief talk, provide you with some resources to go check out if you may be a very avid angler, recreational fishing, or maybe want to try it for your first or second time. A great one-stop shopping to learn about when and where to go fishing. We're focusing on the spring. As I mentioned, in Monmouth County, striped bass is a great species to go for in April and May. It's been a relatively warm winter in terms of the marine conditions, so the striped bass are biting now. Striped bass, bluefish will be here fairly soon, hopefully, as the water warms up in the middle of May. But you can fish along the coast, along Raritan Bay, or down along the coast if you want to go surf-based fishing. There are party boats that you can go on. You go for 4 to 8 hour trips. You pay per person, or you can charter a whole boat for 6 to 20 people or more, depending upon the group size and what you're interested in. NJDEP Division of Fish and Wildlife, their homepage here on saltwater fishing, crabbing, and clamming. They have guides on party and charter boats, boat launches if you want to launch a boat and fish on your private vessel, as well as they have guides for surf-based fishing and fishing piers throughout the state of New Jersey. So a great spot, webpage to check out, and you can navigate from there to really most any topic on fisheries here in New Jersey. It's also very important to know before you go what the regulations are for our marine fisheries. The 2021 regulations are coming out soon. They will be posted as soon as they become available on the DEP Marine Regulations website. Most of them are more than previous years, are staying very similar to 2020 this year. Those are shown here, screenshot it, and also available on the DEP website. If you have any questions, you can also email me or check in with your local tackle shop to help keep up with what the regulations are for 2021. In some instances, they have changed from 2020, but it's great to be in the know before you go, for sure, to make sure you're within compliance and responsibly and sustainably harvesting if you're out recreational fishing. Another key component, if you're on a for hire boat or a party charter vessel, then the captain on that boat reports what you're catching. They'll be up on top of the boat, or at the end of the day, recording what was caught and providing that information to go into the science and management processes. But if you're fishing off the beach, a pier, a private boat, yours or a friend's, it's mandatory to be registered in New Jersey's saltwater recreational registry program. Do that before you go. It's free. It's not a license like some other states, but it's really important to be part of this registry because it's a law that you must be, but then also that it helps identify those who are recreational fishing here in New Jersey and throughout the US. And then that's how you can contribute also to the science and data collection process. Even if you only go once a year, you're then enter into the statistical design, potentially be contacted about what you caught, and then providing your input into the science and management through the data on your fishing effort and catch. In addition to the recreational fisheries, there are commercial fisheries throughout the state, as I noted, including in Monmouth County. Mostly, a lot of them are based around Belford and the Belford Seafood Co-op, but also along the Bayshore and down towards Brielle and in Belmar and Shark River. So if you don't want to, might not be able to or interested to go out and catch your own, or if you do, and in conjunction want to consume some locally harvested New Jersey seafood, there's the Support New Jersey Seafood web app. You can visit here on this tool. Check out, we have markets, restaurants, delivery, pickup, and distributors of fresh local seafood as a tool to help connect interested consumers with local seafood producers. So thanks to everyone for your attention. As I noted, here's my phone and email address. Very happy to answer any questions that we have time tonight, or to contact me if you have any more interest in seafood and our fisheries and marine ecosystems.
Thanks, Doug. This really shows, the wealth and diversity of the ecosystem that we have here in Monmouth County and in New Jersey. We're really lucky to have so much available to us. We do have two questions, and one is about the recent fish kill that was in the Navesink River caused by bacteria. Do you know if that bacteria has been identified and how it got into the river?
Good question. Yes, it's very popular in the news. I don't know how it got into the river, but it has been something that's been increasing over years. Dr. Jan Lobe is the fish pathologist for the state, NJDEP. They've been monitoring this for the last few years, sampling the fish. They identified it as a species of Vibrio, different than the species of Vibrio that we get in the shellfish, but it is a Vibrio species, and they've been monitoring and studying it for a couple of years now.
Great, thanks. And then the other question is the state or Rutgers tracking the amount of salt that townships, counties, and parkway and turnpike authorities are using, and how much does that road salt and the chemicals on the roads impact freshwater and marine waters?
Interesting question. I've been asked that once or twice before. I have never seen anything of that in the Bureau of Marine Water Monitoring information that we bring into our extension programs. So I can't comment on if that might be a negligible impact or if it's something more significant that I just have not read up on in the past.
Great, thank you. And if anybody has more questions for Doug, you can type that into the chat, send him an email, or give us a call. And thank you, Doug.
Thank you, a pleasure.
All right. Next up, we want to invite Steve Retke, and Steve is our IPM program associate, and that is Integrated Pest Management. So Steve visits nurseries and greenhouses all throughout the state, and he has literally seen it all, I'm sure. And so his talk tonight is Landscape Curiosities, and he's going to share with us some interesting things that you can go outside and discover for yourselves. Steve, welcome.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, Bill. I hope everything's up and running smoothly here.
Looks good.
Good, great. Always enjoy listening to Dr. Zemeckis on the aquatic environment of the coastal area. So that was outstanding. And my talk this afternoon, or this evening actually, is Landscape Curiosities. And so I've been in charge of running the anchor leg of this evening's session. And I think we're in trouble because I'm not particularly a fast runner. So we'll see how this works out. So yes, I do a lot of work with nurseries and greenhouses, but I also do a lot of walking around landscapes in my own yard oftentimes. And many of the photographs I have this evening are from my own yard. And this is one I saw this last summer. It was in my turf, and I saw it the previous summer as well. And I was really quite confused by it. It kind of looks like, I thought maybe it's a slime mold or maybe it's a fungus mycelium, but the grass was looking healthy and fine. In fact, I was so curious that I sent this photograph to the director of the diagnostic lab at Rutgers, Rich Buckley, and he came back with his answer is, wow, that's weird. And so he didn't know either. So I suspect it's probably some kind of a fungus mycelium, but it's not a turf pathogen. And maybe it was feeding on roots. This is a question that, we get humbled all the time when we go out and try to diagnose things, and it's not always easy, okay? So I wanted to talk about these 14 or now 15 with the unknown, and I don't have a lot of time, so we'll just kind of hopefully flow through these fairly rapidly. And so let's, instead of talking about them, let's go ahead and get started. And the first one is one that, well, I'll tell you, if you find this in your mulch, in your landscape bed, you might have a, anxiety attack or psychological trauma. And these are slime molds, and they have the ability to move across the landscape. And they're actually not a fungus, even though they may look like a fungus. They're actually an amoeba, and typically they live as in the soil. Okay, but occasionally they come up and they produce fruiting bodies, and what you may have on occasions, you'll have two spores that are compatible, and they'll fuse together, and then they start reproducing and dividing again and again and again, and it produces something that kind of looks like a blob. It can have different colors. Oftentimes they're yellow, sometimes they're white, and as the one on the right there shows, it's black in color. But they do, what happens is after they've divided them numerous times, they're actually a single cell, believe it or not. They may have many nuclei within that cell, and they move around and they look for food, and they divide, and they can actually move in different directions as a group, and wherever the most food is located, that's where they head, and they all head out in one. And it's just it's a single cytoplasmic streaming that's taking place, and so it's really quite interesting and maybe upsetting to you if you see this. And then they climb things vertical, and as the one on the right there shows you, it's one that's maybe about a foot and a half off the ground, and that's starting to dry up, and as they dry, they start shedding their spores, and that's how they spread and reproduce. So that's the slime mold. Okay, interesting. Another one that you may see is, this is actually a fungus. It's called the shotgun artillery fungus, and that's just a natural wood decomposer. But as you can see on the left there, what they will do is they will shoot their spores, and sometimes quite forcibly, and they will often they're highly phototropic, which means they like to shoot their spores toward a light area. So it could be a reflection or a white surface, like a siding as shown there on the left, or maybe it's a white car or a bumper that's nice and shiny and reflective. And the spores that are in the mulch, breaking it down, will shoot these spores. And as I indicate there, sometimes 20 feet or possibly more. It's apparently one of the only, in fact, I've heard it is the only fungus that you can audibly hear when they shoot their spores. And so it's difficult to remove. And maybe if you have tens of thousands of these little black spots, you become quite upset because it kind of defaces your siding on your house, especially if it's a white color, or your car. Sometimes it'll land on plants. That happens to be a plant surface that it didn't mean to hit the plant, but it did. All right, so now let's move on to lichens. All right, I'm sure many of you have seen lichens, and it's one of the more mysterious type of plant organisms we have. Is they're not well understood, and there are many species of different types of lichens. And what they are is a mutualistic or a symbiotic fungi and algae growth that form together. The algae is good for being able to photosynthesize and helps the fungus out, and then the fungus can produce nutrients that the algae can't. And so they've learned to grow well together. And as apparently in the literature states, there's no harm to your trees that's taking place. And so you don't need to worry about it. In fact, oftentimes it's an indication of clean air. Occasionally, as shown on there on the right, people will think that, maybe there's something wrong with their plant and it's beginning to decline, and it's beginning to have branches that are dying off. And so suddenly with the greater light, then the lichens, probably mostly because of the algae, they like that extra light, and they begin to proliferate and grow even further. And people mistakenly blame the lichens on the death of their branches, but that's not the case. Okay. So we have another one here. This is quite unusual. I don't see a lot of these, and they're usually going to be found on deciduous trees, less often on conifers. But these are burls or knot type growths. And what happens with this, you have a proliferation of wound peridome, compartmentalizing. Apparently what's happening is it's a wound response. So the tree has been wounded, sometimes very relatively minor way, but in the tree responds. They try to wall off and compartmentalize the wound, make a pruning cut, and you have what's called wound peridome that tries to seal off that pruning cut. But sometimes for a genetic reason, they don't have the ability to stop that compartmentalization, and that callus tissue keeps building and growing over time, and it produces sometimes these rather unattractive types of growths or knots. However, it might be interesting to note that if you are a furniture maker, especially if you make like coffee tables, you can use this type of burl or knot, and it makes a beautiful surface if you make it into a coffee table. It's very dense wood and very hard, and so it can be quite attractive in appearance. So, all right. So this is interesting. I see occasionally, especially with we have a lot of sap feeders out there. Aphids are a good example. We have some soft scale, a group of scales that were in the soft scale area where they actually feed in the phloem or the sap. And so if you are, when the aphids, or in this case shown there on the left, you got a tulip tree scale, and it's really, as it sucks up the sap, it releases, they don't need all that sugary material, and so they exude it out and they get rid of it. And on the case on the left, you can maybe see this little branch area where a pool of honeydew had developed, and so this ant comes along and starts to drink out of it. Okay, and go back. And so that's really quite interesting, because the ants and other types of insects, they like that honeydew and that sugar. It's a free energy drink for them. And then on the interesting is on the right, you notice that ants also will protect their honeydew producers. In this case, there's more of these tulip tree scales shown there, but you had lots of predators that were beginning to also feed on the scales, and so the ants wanted to protect them. And so what they did is they brought soil up from the ground, and they built these little soil condos. They surrounded the scale insects so to help prevent predators from coming in after that. They want to save, the ants want to save those from themselves. And so that's showing here a yellow jacket trying to maybe drink the honeydew as well as maybe also eat the scales. So they stop that with these soil condos. All right, something that's really quite weird looking. And on the left, this happened to me at a nursery over the last few years at the same nursery, and that's a river birch. Now the one on the left, or that left photo, it's a river birch that looks quite natural. The leaves are full size and everything looks good. However, this particular nursery has had an experience of infestations of potato leafhoppers. Now, when potato leafhoppers feed, and it's usually very early in the spring when the leaves are just forming and coming out, they will inject a toxin as they start to feed on the plants. And when they do this, they disrupt the hormones of the plants, or they actually introduce hormones that creates an apical dominance that prevents apical dominance, rather. So you would have it's a very short internodes. The tree are not, the branches are not growing naturally. They're not elongating. The leaves are quite stunted, or they're strap-like, and so it looks really quite unusual. And we call that a witch's broom. Now, the one on the right is from actually a type of a mite. It's called an Areophyid mite, and it actually injects a virus, and the virus creates an abnormal hormonal imbalance that creates, in this case, mostly it's multifloral roses. It creates a lot of excessive thorns, and maybe you can see there. The leaves are very strap-like, kind of just a distorted appearance to them. And actually the stem gets rather thick. And so that's called the rose rosette disease. And I do see that occasionally in nurseries as well. All right, so moving along, we have another one that's called, these are more of the Areophyid mites, the creating leaf galls. And oftentimes we see them on maples, these types of maple bladder gall that's shown on the left. And then we have a maple erinium gall showing on the right. And what happens in this particular case, you have these overwintering Areophyid mites. They're tiny organisms. They are mites, but they only have four legs, 2 pair. Most of you, if you know spider mites, they have, just like regular spiders, they have 8 legs, where these Areophyid mites only have 2. So they overwinter, they kind of hang out in little crevices of the bark and maybe the bud scales. And then as the leaves begin to elongate and expand, which is about what's happening now, the mites will then begin to feed and lay eggs. And then as the leaves begin to elongate further or expand further, these protective type growths occur. That is, again, an introduction of a type of toxin that creates these gall-like growths. And then this gall surrounds the mites, and they can use them as protection. And the one on the right is a little bit unusual one. It's kind of almost, it has a beaded-like appearance to it. And this is called the maple erinium gall. And so all these different galls that are produced. Oak trees are also very notorious for galls, and I'll talk about those in just a minute. But these maple galls, mostly it's red maples, and occasionally you'll see them on silver maples. In fact, in both cases here, those are silver maples. Okay, this one I want to emphasize. I don't want to spend too much time, but these are not really harmful for the tree. Trying to control this would be very difficult. The timing of any kind of a treatment would have to be almost precise, which is just probably not worth the effort to try to do it, because many times they'll be very prolific, as shown here in these 2 photos. The next year they'll be gone. They won't even come back. All right, so we got another one that I'm sure maybe more and more of you are familiar with. These are the cedar apple gall, for the rust galls. On the left, you've got these galls that don't produce these bright orange tilial horns, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But this is a 2-year life cycle. And these galls are produced on eastern red cedar, which are a juniper species, Juniperus virginiana. And it's a 2-year life cycle. That first year is the smaller one shown there on the left, and rather on the right of the left picture. It's confusing. And then the second year, they get much larger. They can be about the size of a golf ball. And then it takes about 2.5 years, and then that following spring, this photograph that was on the left was actually taken late in the, kind of late in the summer. It was probably sometime in September or October I took that photograph. And then the following spring, about now, and then all the way into May as well, you'll start to have these gelatinous tilial horns developing. These are releasing literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of spores. And what they do, it's a rust disease, and so it means they often have alternate hosts. In this case, it's going to infect the leaves of apple and crabapple trees. So it's not very harmful to the junipers at all. In fact, after the second year, is after these tilial horns are all developed, that's it. There will be no more, the gall dries up and dies and will fall off the tree eventually. Okay. All right, I tell you, my time is running quick. I'm going to skip around a little bit here. I wanted to get to a couple I wanted to finish up with. And here we have European hornets, kind of an interesting one. Often toward August and September, you'll see these very large hornets. In fact, they're the largest true hornet in North America. And what they do is they will go to trees like river birch and maybe what are some of the other ones? Redbud, cercis. They'll feed on things like oh gosh, where's my memory? Rhododendrons. I think I've seen them feed on those. And what they're doing is they are, with the saliva and the feeding, and they're removing the bark from the trees and they're girdling it. And they can actually kill branches when they do this. And they feed like they're eating a corn or cob, and it's completely circled. And when the branches are completely girdled and circled, it kills it, anything beyond that point. So yeah, these can create a lot of damage, and I do have nurseries that have to deal with these, and there's no labeled insecticides for them. So they often, not with my approval, but they use insecticides that they're not supposed to because they're not labeled for anything. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip through this as well. And let me get to this one, just a couple left we have. The time is just about over here. We have woodpeckers and emerald ash borers. Now, I think all of you are probably familiar with the problems with our fraxinus or various species of ash tree. It's primarily green ash and white ash, but all the ash trees are affected. And one picture on the left is that I just took recently. It's in my own neighborhood. It's not my trees because my trees are being protected. But what happens is that when you get a lot of these emerald ash borers and the larvae are feeding very shallow, just under the bark, you get woodpeckers coming in and they start scraping the bark off and shredding it. And they want to get these larvae that are feeding. And you can see them just many, many feet along the major branches of this particular ash tree. And when you see that, that's not a good sign, because probably the next 2 years, year or two, your tree is going to look like the one on the right. So yes, that's not a good sign. If you see, this is, by the way, called blonding. Another term I've heard is flecking. And so that's what's woodpeckers that are looking for the larvae. Okay, let's see. What do we have left? I got to finish up with this because I see my time is up. So our Monmouth County agent loves when I talk about this particular thing. And this is the Austrian pine cones. I'm kind of a little weird thing on this that I keep bringing up. But what happens that I collect, we got a lot of Austrian pines in the neighborhood where I live at. And I collect hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them every year. And I put them all throughout my mulched beds. And I use them as, they're very attractive mulch, but you can see it depends upon the moisture level, and they will close these cones, even though they may have fallen off the tree for years. They close up, and when it's wet, and then as it begins to dry, the cones of the scales of the cones begin to open up, and they spread out, and they maybe double their area, their volume. And I actually have my own mulch beds shown there on the right. And that's the attractive mulch, in my opinion, at least, of Austrian pine cones. But I tell you, a lot of people think it's very strange, and they don't understand it. And my homeowners association landscapers don't understand it either. Every year they want to remove the mulch, and I have to stop them. Hopefully I catch them. So, all right, well, that's it. And that's obviously, I've been told I'm a kind of a tree hugger, which I guess I'm guilty of. But I tell you, that is a genuine tree hugger there, that young person. So, okay, well, that's I think time I need to stop here.
Thank you, Steve. I like that pine cone mulch. I think
Oh,
that
you
looks
do?
really cool.
Okay, well, I wasn't so sure. Maybe you're just trying to be nice.
I think it looks cool.
Yeah.
We do have a question. Somebody wanted to know about the oak galls. If you could briefly touch on that. I know you skipped over that for time.
Yeah, I did. I see my time is really out. Yeah, there's the two, most of our woody oak galls, or galls on anything, are not particularly harmful to most trees. However, there's definitely two exceptions. There's probably a few others, but the ones that we find most commonly in our area are the gouty oak gall and the horned oak gall. Okay, and they can actually kill branches, and they're almost invariably going to be found on Quercus molluscus, which is the pin oaks. Okay, and if you have a pin oak in your yard, which by the way, I do, and guess where I got those sample photographs from my own pin oak, and both of them different species, the horned oak gall and the gouty oak gall, but very difficult to control. Fortunately, there seems to be a lot of good biological control. They're probably mostly parasitoid wasps that are keeping the wasps that produce those particular types of galls. And so that has been, fortunately, not a serious problem with my tree. But yeah, they can definitely cause branch dieback and decline. Yeah, those two galls. Wish I could talk more about it, but I don't want to continue.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And if you find landscape curiosities in your yard or something you're not sure of, you can always send us a picture, give our office a call. We love to see new things and to try to figure it out. So thank you everyone for staying with us. I hope you have enjoyed this. Before you go, I'm going to launch a brief poll. And so this should show up on your screen. And if you could take a minute to fill this out, these polls help us to improve our programs, evaluate what we're doing, and to deliver programming that's important and relevant to you. So if you have a minute and you wouldn't mind filling this out, we really appreciate that. And I will also remind everyone that next Wednesday, we have the FCHS presenting. Oops, so I can go back to that. Their program is coming up next Wednesday, 7 to 8 p.m., April 21st. And we hope you will join us again next week. So I hope you've enjoyed the program tonight. There's many excellent things to do in your yard or along the coast or in our parks in Monmouth County and in the surrounding area. So thank you, everyone. Be safe, be well, and take care.